Welcome back to Ask a Coroner, the podcast where we answer the questions people have always wanted to ask about death investigations. I'm Mark Hammond, the Boyd County Coroner.
And I'm Bailey Rucker, Deputy Coroner.
And tonight we're in episode 10. So we're going to talk tonight about how we determine the cause of somebody's death and the manner of somebody's death. And both of those go hand in hand. The manner is probably the biggest thing that we're going to discuss, because a lot of people don't realize why we put something on a death certificate and the reasoning behind that and why it matters and why it's so important to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is just the fact that there is a cause and there's a manner, and the difference between those. Because when I started, I didn't know what the heck either one of them meant. I just thought they were both the same thing. So kind of talk about the difference between cause and manner and maybe how your brain starts thinking.
So the cause is really what happened. And the death certificate, when you look at a death certificate, there's actually 4 causes that you can put on a death certificate. So we try to make sure that when we do that, we tell a story. Mm-hmm. So the ultimate cause of death compared to what caused that death. Respiratory failure, for instance. Respiratory failure may be the cause of their death, but underneath that, what else caused that death would be maybe pneumonia or something like that. And then we look at manners of death. And then you have a natural death. You have a accidental death. You can have a suicide. And you can also have a homicide. And then you can have an undetermined manner of death. And we're going to talk about all those and why those are important.
So the cause is kind of like actually what happens, like saying somebody had a heart attack, and then the manner is like the legal classification that you would say, the natural, what you're talking about.
And all those become very important, especially like insurance policies, things like that. We get a lot of open records requests for things like that because it matters how you sign something out. Mm-hmm. And that becomes really important. And we strive to sign out death certificates that doesn't have a undetermined cause of death. You can also put pending. There's a pending on there too. Yeah. But the good thing is in Kentucky anyways, the law plainly states that we have to have a death certificate signed out within 5 days of after all of our testing is done. So that helps us tremendously, because I always tell everybody that if we do toxicology on everybody, you know that. So toxicology is just a tool that we use. Well, that toxicology alone is 2 to 3 weeks out. Yeah. So every death certificate usually with us, unless it's just a rare case, is at least 2 to 3 weeks out before we actually are able to sign that death certificate and get it out of our system and to the funeral homes where it belongs.
Okay, so the manner, the legal classification, there are 5 total?
So we look at natural deaths, you're looking at heart attacks, different things like that. You look at accidental deaths. Accidental deaths can be from falls, they can be from car accidents, and we'll break all those down. Yeah. Then on top of that, you can look at suicide, or to meet a lot of social media standards, somebody that did self-harm to themselves. And we'll look at that and we'll talk about that. We look at homicide, and homicide gets really confusing because we classify a death a homicide, and people think automatically that somebody's going to be charged or somebody's going to go to jail or prison. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Then you get into the fact of pending, and a lot of people in other states, they will get a death certificate out that has to go with that body as soon as it happens. So it'll put pending investigation or pending a cause of death. We don't like to do that. And the reason we don't like to do that is the simple fact that if you do that on a death certificate, you're going to have to go back and amend that death certificate. And amending a death certificate takes a lot longer than anything else you can do. And then, of course, undetermined. And when you look at undetermined, there's very few times that we have signed out a death certificate that is undetermined for a manner of death. And we'll explain a couple of those as we move forward.
Okay. So moving on to breaking each one of those kind of down with natural deaths. What are the natural deaths that you see probably the most, and how do you work those differently compared to all the others?
So it depends on where that death happens. If we're at a house, the only thing that we've got to go by is their medical history, and basically we're pulling medical records, we're doing toxicology, and we're looking at those things. One of the big things that people need to realize is let's take the myth out of the TV. So the myth from the TV is everybody's going to get an autopsy, and it's going to show that that person has had a heart attack, and that's not necessarily true at all. What it will show is the heart has disease, that the heart is larger than it should be. And so that death certificate is going to say hypertensive cardiovascular disease or atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. Those are some death certificates that we see constantly, and it's like a catch-all for heart disease. But it depends on what that person has is how we write that. The only time, one of the things that does happen is when we're at a hospital, say we're working a death out of the ER, and that person, we're then able to get labs. So we're able to get like troponin levels. And troponin levels are basically when you, it picks up the injury of the heart. So those should be 0 when we go in. If you go in today and you have chest pains, then they're going to do a baseline troponin level, and it should be zeros. And then from there, they're going to start looking at every 3 to 4 hours, they're going to do that test again to see if that rises. If it rises, we know we got injury to the heart.
Yeah.
But there's other things that can cause that. So it's a tool, and that's all it is. CPR is going to raise it a little bit. So there's different things that can raise it. If they're involved in an accident and say a steering wheel hits their chest, that's going to raise it a little bit. So when we look at that, we got to look at the whole picture. So we take that scene and we say, okay, did they have any injury? If the answer is no, that helps. If the troponin levels, and we use what's called a high sensitivity level when we get that test. So for a man, that test would be 15, anything 15 and above. For a lady or for a female, it's 20 and above. Or let me reverse that. Let's reverse that. The man gets an extra 5. So it's 15 for a woman and 20 for a man.
I always get that. For some reason, I can never remember that sequence either.
So in turn, when we see that, it's like, oh, okay, this troponin level is 120.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, CPR alone shouldn't raise it to 120. So then we can pretty much look at that as a tool and say, okay, this person did have a heart attack or a myocardial infarction. And in turn, then we can type that on a death certificate and we're good. We have something to back that up with. It's the same thing with, we look at D-dimers. A lot of people will say a D-dimer will give you a false reading. Well, it will, depending on what happens. So we look at different tools. We look at what happened with that person. He was standing there, she was standing there, and instantly got short of breath, and all of a sudden then collapsed and went unconscious, and they worked him into the hospital. And now we have somebody that has a D-dimer of, say, 10,000.
Yeah.
Okay, my first thing is, number one, it shouldn't be greater than 250.
Yeah.
Does the did CPR cause that D-dimer to go up? Yeah, it could. So we look at that. Then we also look at, did they have any infection? Infection will raise a D-dimer drastically. It's like a troponin level. If a troponin level is up really high, one of the first things I want to know is, have they had any testing done with their heart? Have they had a heart cath? Have they had a heart attack in the last week or two? Because a troponin level will actually stay risen for at least somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 weeks before it starts going back down. So we don't want to give something false on a death certificate that we can't back up and prove. So if that's the case, then we may just say, okay, that was an atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, or that was hypertensive cardiovascular disease. Same thing with another one would be somebody that has COPD. That's a huge thing in this area.
Yeah, especially in this area.
So in turn, that, the COPD is a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So somebody that has that we deal with a lot, they may go into respiratory failure because of their COPD causing them issues. So then we would list like respiratory failure due to exasperation of the COPD that caused their death.
Mm-hmm.
So we look at painting the whole picture on there as we move up and down. It may be the fact of complications of a certain type of cancer. It could be cancer that has metastasized into different parts of the body. It may start as pancreatic cancer, and then it goes into the stomach, and then it goes into the lungs and the brain. So instead of writing all that out, it may be complications due to cancer of, and then we list those cancers. So that's another thing that would be a natural death. We're trying to think of some other things that may be a natural death. It could be the simple fact of somebody that is elderly that has dementia. Dementia is a horrible disease. And in turn, people just start dwindling away. And a lot of the problems with dementia and Alzheimer's is a simple fact that they forget to eat and things like that. So this person has now went from hundreds of pounds, 110, 120 pounds, down to 80 pounds. And we see that a lot. And that death certificate may say that they have adult failure to thrive, and due to the dementia and the Alzheimer's disease. So there's different things to put on that death certificate. So I try to make sure that death certificate is complete as possible when we do that.
Yeah, as most detailed as it can be. And with talking about like troponin and D-dimer levels and things in the ER, when we get deaths out of there, that tool that we kind of use there is also like requesting medical records for a home death. We get history and stuff from family and then try to connect those dots, then look at maybe something they left out through their medical records that we could see, okay, yes, this person was in the hospital, a week ago and did have some elevated levels here. So like all of those pieces are working together, and just those tools look different versus the scene that you're working.
Yeah, a scene we have limited things that we can pull from to say, okay, this is why this person died. To where if we're at a hospital, especially, we work very well with the ER, and the ER will have kind of like a standard set of things that they go ahead and run for us. We like to see white blood counts. We like to see hemoglobins. We like to see different things to where we can look at that and say, okay, this is what it was now compared to a week ago, or compared to, a month ago even. That, okay, a month ago when I look at that, when you look at somebody that's on dialysis a lot of times will raise troponin levels, because the kidney, where the kidneys doesn't function, it can cause heart issues. So in turn, their troponin level is probably going to be constantly raised a little bit. So in turn, we take that into consideration before we can say, okay, this is why they died. And so we look at all that.
Right. And I think another thing is that people see natural deaths mostly occurring in hospitals where they maybe see their loved one deteriorating, or they see, a doctor working on them and they say, it may be their time to go soon. So in-home deaths kind of already get people's minds thinking differently than if it occurred in the hospital.
And that's really true. I mean, and yesterday we had a busy day.
Yeah.
We did from 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. this morning. So a 24-hour period, we did 5 deaths. And all those were natural deaths. They were either due to cancers, or they were due to, one person was to where they had
one was a heart attack.
One was a heart attack. One was a GI bleed. One was a diabetic. That's another thing that comes in. The neat thing about the diabetes case that we had was, it came in to be eventually we figured this out, but it first come in as a possible overdose. Well, then once I got everything and I got the whole story, it was like, I don't think this is an overdose. So we started looking at testing, and urine testing showed, that they had a urine test, and the glucose level was over 1,000. And then the blood test for glucose showed over 765. Well, when you start looking at that, if it's an early test, if it's a quick test, yeah, it's going to give you a good reading. But a lot of times, if somebody has been down a long time, that's not going to show for us. Now, the difference in seeing that and a home test is we say we get somebody at home that's a diabetic, then we run their blood and we do a toxicology, we get back acetone. Acetone in turn tells us that diabetes had a problem, had some type of issue with that death that helped with that death. So we can see that still, but actually having numbers and things really help us a lot too.
Yeah. So what are kind of some things that you see on a scene that maybe have your brain thinking, this could be a natural death? I'm going to ask this question. Like, what are maybe some markings on a body, anything lying around, things like that?
One of the biggest things is we want to look at the whole room. We want to look at the whole house for that matter, but definitely what's in and around that body. For instance, we find a lot of people that they are either on the bed and their feet's dangling off the bed and they're straight back onto the bed, or they've tried to get up out of bed and they're on the floor. And they may have, say they have COPD or they have some type of respiratory issue, then we're looking around and, okay, do they have oxygen? Do they have some type of nebulizer treatments there that they were trying to set up? Things like that we look for clues. One of the biggest things when I do an interview is I want to know what happened the last 72 to 48 hours. That's where I start. So let's start at 48 hours. Was anything out of the ordinary? Well, they didn't feel good. Well, what do you mean by not feeling good? So a lot of times you got to ask the right questions. Well, they were a diabetic, and let's say they were in bed for 3 or 4 days. They had issues with vomiting, things like that. They haven't ate. Those raise somebody's blood sugar up to where they go into what's called DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. And when that happens, then the body starts shutting down. If it keeps on climbing and climbing and climbing, it's a slow progressive thing, and usually that takes not hours but days for that to happen. That's a telltale sign for us to when I start doing toxicology, I'm like, am I going to get that back or not? And I think, okay, acetone's going to be in their system. That helps me out tremendously knowing that. Electrolytes, getting an electrolyte panel. If we see a potassium level, if a potassium level is way out of whack, we know that that's going to, in turn, cause heart arrhythmias. So, okay, if their potassium should have been between like 3.5 and 5.4, and say it's sitting at 10, they probably threw an arrhythmia. That was probably one of their biggest problems, because people can't live very long with potassium levels like that. In turn, I want to know what kind of rhythm did they have coming to the hospital. And they'll say, okay, they started out at VTAC, so they were shocked. They were defibrillated. We defibrillated them 10 times, or we defibrillated them 5 times, and we gave them this medicine and this medicine, and all we got was pulseless electrical activity. Looks like a heart rate, but it's not. And then we start going, okay, why did they do that? Well, there's only certain causes for that. So we start going down the list, and we get the electrolytes, and it's like, oh, okay, wait a minute, the potassium's way out of whack. That's why they went into this rhythm. That's why they died. So that becomes part of the death certificate a lot of times when we do that.
Okay, so now let's switch into accidental deaths. And these really occur probably more than people realize, just because it's like we talked about working a case backwards. You could go backwards all the way down this time and say, okay, this actually, could have happened because of a fall from way down yonder. But what classifies an accidental death?
I just want to know what classifies way down yonder.
Dang it.
But in turn, what ends up happening is You know, when we look at that, you're exactly right. These are the people that come into the hospital and they've fallen at home and they have a brain bleed. And then the hospital will want to sign that out as a respiratory failure due to the brain bleed because of a fall. Well, that becomes an accident. That automatically is kicked to us. Anything that's not a natural death is automatically kicked to us. So when we start seeing that, then I got to work it backwards. So I've got to get all the medical records. I got to find something that backs that up before I can put accidental on a death certificate. So then that becomes, okay, I talk to the family. Yeah, they fell at home, they hit their head. And that's a common thing, especially as we get older. Rugs, they fall on rugs all the time, and they trip over their feet. There's things laying there. They're very unsteady on their gait as they're walking, so they have an unsteady gait a lot of times. So in turn, when that happens, what ends up happening a lot of times is that instead of a natural death of, say, respiratory failure, I would put that as that the person had respiratory failure due to an intracranial bleed due to a fall at home. So it would be 3 of those forward lines that I would use, and that would tell my story. So that becomes an accidental death. And now, say for insurance purposes, somebody that would have had a $50,000 policy, but if it's an accident, now they have a $150,000 policy. So to me, that's I wouldn't do my due diligence if I didn't take care of that and make sure that death certificate has exactly what it says, and making sure I can back that up and prove that.
Yeah.
And probably the last 6 months, we've had 3 of those that I've worked backwards and actually went in and fixed, and it became our case. So that becomes important to us.
So, other things that count as accidental, like vehicle crashes, some fires, but things that people don't realize, I think, are overdoses a lot of the time. Because most of the time, people aren't meaning to overdose, but those are classified as accidental because they're not intending to hurt themselves.
And you're exactly right. Probably 90%, 95% of our cases that I sign out for an overdose death is signed out and classified as an accident. Now, if we get huge numbers, then it's a whole different story. Then we go back and we start asking a lot of questions. But for the most part, you're exactly right. Those people, they're trying to get that high. They're not trying to kill themselves. So that death becomes an accident. So unless they're trying to do self-harm, and when I say that is we look for a lot of clues. Is that person depressed? Did that person leave a note? Did that person leave anything at all to somebody else? And it's not just notes. It's they may have left voicemails. They may have left a number of things that would change that. But until we can prove that, that is an accidental death. And we're going to do a whole segment on overdosing.
Yeah.
Because I think overdose in this area is huge, number one. And number two, we want to look at why we classify that as an overdose.
Yeah, it's very misunderstood.
As an accident, because we can't prove anything else.
Yeah.
We can't prove that they want to self-harm themselves. So in turn, to us, that's an accident. Now, just because it's an accident doesn't mean that we can't prosecute that case. So we work with law enforcement, whatever jurisdiction that is in, and things like phones and Facebook messages and Snapchats and all this other stuff suddenly becomes very important to us in that case, which in turn is turned over to the prosecuting attorney's office or the Commonwealth Attorney's office to see if we can prosecute somebody that sold them those drugs. And so that happens a lot. And we've been very successful on having that happen. So anytime it's an overdose, and we'll talk more about that in a segment, but we treat that as a crime scene. So people don't think a lot of that about that, but our drownings, a drowning's considered, an accident. Fire deaths are considered an accident. Vehicle crashes are considered an accident. So we look at all those, and vehicle crashes, when we start looking at those, is another thing that, okay, they're hit by a drunk driver. Is that a homicide or is that an accident? Well, it's an accident, but there's a place on the death certificates for accidents, and it's to tell what happened. And there's a lot of times I write in there, the decedent was a restrained or unrestrained driver, whatever it is, and they were struck by a vehicle that the subject was under the influence, causing their death. Is how I would write that. And so I always try to put all that out there. There's a case right now that probably just went to Ohio, and we had a death over there that got worked over here that we share information all the time. So we shared all of our information as that person that died. It was an accidental death due to the motor vehicle accident, due to blunt force injuries. But Ohio Highway Patrol wanted everything that we had. They wanted our coroner's report. They wanted the toxicology. They wanted the autopsy report and a copy of the death certificate. So we share that with other agencies to help with prosecution if that's what's need to be done.
So that kind of makes me think, because there's almost a thin line that kind of teeter-totters between homicide, suicide, and accidental. And when you walk into a scene, you're pretty much it's homicide until proven or otherwise. That's everybody's thoughts when you walk into it. So how does that kind of change with like fires and stuff when you're proven arson? Is that still considered, like, is an arson fire death still considered an accident?
No, if we have somebody that we have, say, in custody, and we can prove that that was an arson fire, then where it's arson, we would go ahead and we would classify that as a homicide.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that person's going to be found guilty, because with arson, it is very, very difficult to prove that a lot of times, of what their intent was, how it happened, things like that. So in turn, all we're doing is putting that on a death certificate. And here's a classic example. Let's talk about homicide for a minute.
Okay.
A homicide in our realm of how we classify that is one person taking another person's life. It doesn't mean that it's intentional, unintentional, or anything else. So when we look at that, let's say a police officer has to use his weapon or her weapon and shoot somebody. In our classification, that is a homicide. Now, in turn, everybody's and media jumps on this all the time, and so does a lot of other people that follow cases like that. And they're like, oh, the coroner ruled this a homicide, so that person has to be guilty of murder.
Yeah.
And that's not true. From there, then it goes to a grand jury. Grand jury decides whether something happened unlawfully or not unlawfully. A case right now to watch and point, and this is a great case to watch, is the simple fact of Louisville, Kentucky had a police officer that shot somebody on a Saturday night. It may have been a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, something like that. The subject was coming at him. The subject was naked. The subject had no weapons whatsoever, and the police officer shot them. Watch what happens with that case. Number one, it's ruled a homicide, I'm sure. The police chief today said that person was going to be fired. And now watch what happens in the legal system as it moves forward if that person is charged with the murder of that person.
Yeah.
So when you see stuff like that, it's kind of interesting to kind of watch, because when I grew up, it was very uncommon to hear of a police officer shooting somebody. Now that's a common thing. It doesn't make front page news a lot of times. And there's a lot of different things that happen with body cams and different things like that, that police departments have policies that release that to prove what happened. And all that is used to prove or disprove our case a lot of times. But say somebody accidentally shoots somebody, they're handing a weapon over to somebody and it goes off. In our classification, everybody's going, well, that's an accident. Well, it is, but it's actually on a death certificate, that's a homicide. Now it's up to somebody else to prove whether that is a case that goes and somebody's being charged for that or not. Same way with somebody that comes in somebody's house. And I have to say somebody comes in my house and I have to shoot them or I have to discharge a weapon and kill them in some way. In turn, when I do that, then that case is still considered a homicide until it goes to a grand, and on the death certificate, it's always going to be ruled that.
Yeah.
And so people don't understand that a lot of times. So that's another one that gets really thin, and it's a thin line. But if you know the true definition, it's not a thin line anymore.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that that has to happen too, because you can muddy the waters really a lot when it comes to that. But if you muddy the waters a lot, the problem is you still have to write what happened. So you're going to write down what happened. And I would much rather have that on the death certificate and be true when I write it out. And that way it's not a problem when it goes on up the chain to where it needs to be.
So homicide is kind of like an umbrella that goes on a death certificate, and then you have to describe everything that happens, and then that's how, you know, a jury would decide. So that's where the charges of like murder versus manslaughter come in a lot of the times. Is that
Yeah, and that's up to the grand jury of what they put on there. All I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over all my findings. And I've said this from day one is evidence won't lead you wrong. So you follow the evidence. We had a case, and this has been a long time ago, but we had a case of a gentleman that it was a home invasion. And basically, out in the middle of nowhere, a guy shows up, and the guy hears somebody outside. He opens the door, guy rushes the door, and this person starts shooting. And so he shoots him. The guy goes down. He gets back up. It's the myth is, you know, oh, I'm going to shoot somebody and they're never going to get back up.
Yeah.
That's the biggest myth in the world. This person was shot 4 or 5 times before they finally quit coming.
adrenaline is a powerful thing.
And what helped us more than anything was the guy had it all on DVD because he had cameras in his house. So that becomes part of our case. So when it goes to a grand jury, they not only have the death certificate, they also have the coroner's report, they have the autopsy report, they have the toxicology report, they have all that as a tool to take now to a grand jury and say, okay, this is what happened. Are you going to indict this person or not indict this person? And all the evidence is presented, and then that gets decided. And that's happened here a couple of times at least, but it's been more than 2. And one of those was a domestic that happened, and the wife shot the husband. And of course, we in turn, I had to go testify in that grand jury, and it was a no bill, which means there was no indictment when everything was said and done, because that was a justifiable, homicide that happened where she didn't have a choice but to shoot him.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't understand that. And I always say, you know, let the evidence stand where it stands and don't differ from that, and you'll be fine. And a lot of people they want to sway it this way or this way, but as long as you let the facts stand, that's what you want on that death certificate.
Okay. So next classification, suicide. What is classified as a suicide versus like accidental, which we talked about, kind of like the intent and everything. And then how do you kind of pick through a scene to fully set your brain on I'm confident to say, you know, this was self-harm?
So when we look at self-harm cases that we have, we look back at, is there a history? Is one thing that we look at. We look at what happened on their medical history. Do they have a history of depression? Do they have a history of abuse as far as drugs, alcohol? Have they had any self-harm attempts in the past? All those things have to, you know, kind of mesh in your story that you're doing. Did this person leave a note? Did this person say something to somebody that would make it stand out? Is there any clues? Some people write out everything. A big myth, let's go with another myth, is, oh, they leave a note. Probably 25% maybe
Yeah.
leaves a note, and that's it. So when you start looking at all this, then it's the little things that you pick up on. Well, this person gave me a possession that they never would have gave away. This person made sure that they called every single person that was really close to them and just wanted to talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes, and they were really a lot more loving than they ever are. Um, and then how did they do that? You know, we've had everything from mixing chemicals to gunshots to hangings to different things of how they're going to kill themselves or self harm.
Mhm.
Um, and in turn, when you do that, that's the only time we're really going to classify that. And I think it's very important to make sure you get that right, because that can cause a lot of issues for the family if you do not get that right.
Mhm.
And that's a big thing, I think. And it causes a ripple effect. It causes a huge effect through the community. It causes a huge effect through the family. So you want to make sure that you do tell that story correctly.
Yeah. And it's kind of like what you said earlier, evidence is never going to lead you wrong. So every investigation is kind of the same way, but these specific ones are so tedious to kind of operate around. So you have to truly follow facts and never assume anything because it could, completely change somebody's life.
Well, and that's the big thing is we don't want to ever assume.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we follow everything that we can possibly follow, use every tool that we can before I sign out the death certificate. Because if we put the wrong manner on there, then number one, that's going to cause a lot of issues sometimes with families. And it causes a lot of issues with insurance companies. It's going to cause issues on down the line for years to come. You know as well as I do, there's a lot of people that walk in our office that want to do a open records request.
Mm-hmm.
And so then they see something and it's like, oh, I didn't know that, or no, they told us it was something totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that causes a huge rift in the family that we don't want to see. So we try to fix that long before that time.
Mm-hmm. So the last final classification that would go on a death certificate is undetermined. And that's one that's like you've exhausted all your resources and you just kind of can't pick one over the other. So what leads you to that point?
There's a couple of things. So say, I'll give you a classic example. We had somebody that we investigated to death, and we had these real high numbers in that showed on a toxicology, and it was kind of weird stuff. It was like cardiac medications, things like that. And so in turn, that perks your ears up to where you're going, okay, wait a minute, let's go back and look at this. And so by the time we got everybody involved and we did interviews and we got the police involved and we made sure, what I wanted to make sure was that somebody did not intentionally give that person too much medication.
Yeah.
So when everything was said and done, number one, I could never prove that in a court of law.
Mm-hmm.
So number two, with the numbers as high as there could have been three things happen. Number one, it could have been an accidental death. Number two, it could have been a self-harm death. And number three, somebody could have did it for insurance money or anything else. So in turn, I ruled that as a combined toxicity of drugs as the cause, and I listed out what those drugs were. But then on the manner, I put undetermined, because it could have been a self-harm,
Mm-hmm.
it could have been a homicide, or it could have been an accidental death. I could not disprove any three of those. So it went down as a undetermined manner of death.
Mm-hmm.
And I've did that probably at least a dozen times over the years to where I could not prove that. There's been cases of infants, babies, we talked about child deaths, that we couldn't rule out maybe the fact that they had some type of rollover death or something like that. We couldn't rule that out. We couldn't rule out the fact that it could have been a SIDS case. So in turn, the manner became a undetermined, and the cause was actually undetermined. We could not determine either or, and that happens. That's very rare. Probably since I've been doing this, that's only happened, and I've seen that on a death certificate probably twice. And that's after everything we did with autopsy, all the testing we did, everything that we could possibly imagine to do, we could not prove or disprove why that person died. So that is very, very few and far between, but it does happen. And it's rare that it happens, but it does from time to time. We only got so much to work with.
Yeah.
And so we've only got so many tests to do. And those are the ones that drag on. They drag on to where a normal autopsy, 45 days or so, we got our information, we're able to sign that autopsy. Now that autopsy's gone 6 months, and they still can't find anything.
And they're sending out tissues.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then whoever they send it out is sending out to somebody else. It's literally exhausting all resources.
And I think that becomes, we want to make sure that we do exhaust all resources before we sign a death certificate like that, because to me, that's not closure.
Yeah.
The family doesn't get closure. We don't get closure as far as making sure we did our job correctly or anything like that. So we do not like that at all. So we exhaust everything we can before we do anything.
So this next thing, we've kind of talked about with each death what you're looking for, but you're using toxicology reports, you're using witness statements, family interviews and stuff. What are other kind of things that help you put all the puzzle pieces together?
Well, and we're looking at that time, the medical records we talked about, the witness statements we talked about. Now let's look at, is there any footage in the house? This day and time, technology is huge to where we may have some footage of what went on. What did that person do for the last 8 hours of their life? Did they get up and did they trip and fall? Did they get up and just slump down in the floor? There's a lot of times people have fallen and literally they can't get up, and in turn they've laid there so long that they've passed away.
Yeah.
Whether that be from exposure or whether that be from another medical issue. So we want to kind of put all that into place, and hopefully then we can come up with the answers that we truly need. Especially with the toxicology testing, things like that. We can run special tests, when it comes to looking at different things that we want to test for specifically, then we can do that. So I think all those have to play out before we can actually say, okay, this is the cause.
So back to what you said at the beginning of the episode, after we mentioned undetermined, you talked about pending. What makes a case say pending, and how long does that typically stay there?
It all depends. Like I've probably wrote pending on a death certificate maybe once or twice. One of those happened to be a gentleman that was not from our country, and he was a truck driver. He was from a different country, and he died here, of course. And in turn, to get that body moving and to not hold the family up, we elected to finally, we were waiting on autopsy, and the family was just wanting the body back, and we didn't want to hold it. It was going to take months. And so in turn, that death became a pending investigation death. And that let the family get a copy of a death certificate, get them back across the border to where they could have a funeral and take care of him, because we can only keep them for so long. And we try to make sure the family's not waiting. Now, if that would have been here, then yes, we would have. And the reason being, there's two things. Number one is if they're from another country or something, it's going to take months to make sure that happens. To where if they're from this country, then we can go ahead and hold that death certificate. They can still move forward with arrangements and get them buried and doing what they need to do to get their closure while we're waiting for the autopsy stuff. The thing about it is, to get the body out of the country, we have to have a death certificate. So it's easier to put the death certificate as a pending investigation, and that moves it along.
Okay. And maybe another clarification is on our reports, you have to choose, the cause before printing it off or whatever. So when you're writing that report, you put pending, but that's not the same as putting it on a death certificate.
Correct.
At all.
Yeah, it's the way our reports work is everything's on a report in a computer. It's all cloud based, so we're always writing pending to begin with. And what I always tell the family, where we do so much toxicology, I will always tell the family, I'm looking at a couple of things, but I will not tell you exactly why they died until I get all my testing back.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can possibly do is tell the family that somebody died of this, and then toxicology comes back and it's a totally different ballgame of why they truly died. And then the first thing the family's going to say is, you told me this at the hospital, or you told me this at the house. And then they're mad, and the closure that they did have is totally gone. The trust is totally gone.
Yeah.
It opens up tons of wounds. So I always make sure I say, okay, I'm looking at a couple of things, but I do toxicology on people. I said, that's no disrespect. We do toxicology on everybody. It doesn't matter. And they understand that. And then they understand what's went on. Now, I have had surprises to where I get a toxicology back and the family's like, I thought that they were doing something, but I wasn't for sure. And they're not surprised. Me and you had a case back when you were a transporter, and we went in, and an elderly lady, she was at the ER, and in turn, we did toxicology on her, and we found some things in her bags and stuff when we did a search.
Oh, yeah.
And in turn, when I got the true toxicology back, I called the daughter, and her first words were, I was waiting for your phone call. Because she knew after we talked to her at the hospital, she kind of knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
And in turn, she turned out to be an overdose. And normally, this is what death investigators, coroners, everybody needs to realize is it's real easy to sign that out as a natural death. It's real easy to say, okay, they died of heart disease or they died of whatever. But not giving the truth and not doing the job to make sure that truth happens is a hard thing to do a lot of times.
Everybody wants the truth at the end of the day.
Yeah, and everybody wants to know the truth. And if you don't give them the truth, in turn, then it really hurts your credibility when something else goes on. It's easy to take the easy way out, but in this job, we never want to take the easy way out. Number one, we want to investigate it like we should. Number two, we want to make sure we can give the family the true cause and manner of death. Those are the two big things. And as long as we do that at the end of the day, I think we're all better off.
So then that leads to, can an initial determination change?
Yes, it can. We're working a case, and I really can't talk about it right now, but we're working a case from several years ago that has come to light for us that we're digging through right now that is probably going to be a change on a death certificate. And it's really interesting just being able to see that case, and you're talking a case that goes back about 40 years, that now we're going to be able, probably 9 times out of 10, we're going to end up changing a death certificate once we have the whole package of all the evidence to go and disprove what was put on there to begin with. And that's pretty neat, really, just to see that. And a lot of things have changed. If you talk to some coroners, they don't do as much toxicology as we do. But I think toxicology is important. It's a tool. And
it's a tool that should be used.
Well, we've had people that'll say, well, Mr. So-and-so, they died of a broken heart. Their wife died 6 months ago, and he died from a broken heart. And then we do a toxicology, and they're loaded up with some type of, whether it be hydrocodone or some type of drug. And then it's like, okay, did they mean to do that for self-harm, or they're elderly and they just messed up their medicine? I want to assume they messed up their medicine. So then I start talking and we work that to find what the true manner of death is. Because now the family's already shocked. The family's already shocked that it's not a natural death because we have toxicology to back that up.
Yeah.
So we see that a lot. And I think it's a very disservice if you're not doing the right testing and toxicology and everything. You got to do your due diligence. It's easy to sign that death certificate out as heart disease or respiratory failure or something like that without a toxicology. But how do you know what caused that? And without having that toxicology, it's hard to prove that.
So then say, you do an autopsy, you do the toxicology, who actually decides what the cause and manner of death is after getting all the information?
So two things happen. If it's an autopsy, then of course we get all the information from a forensic pathologist. They look at the same things we do, and then they give us a recommendation of what to put on a death certificate. But by law in Kentucky, we can put the coroner or the deputy is the one that decides truly what goes on that death certificate. Now, once it's signed, then we send that into Frankfurt to where whoever did that autopsy can see what we wrote. But we use their expertise for that. If it's anything that doesn't go for autopsy, then basically it's up to the deputy or the coroner of what goes on that death certificate, and they're the ultimate say-so of what happens and what gets put on there.
But it's still all a collaborative process. Like
Everybody.
you're going to include law enforcement, say, these are the findings. Do you agree with what I'm going to put on here?
Communication and collaboration is probably the two biggest things that you can do to make sure everybody's on the same page.
And that's been a big key point in every single episode we've published so far, is how collaborative this line of work is. It has to be.
You have to walk with the same people. Even though in Kentucky and in several states, coroners are considered peace officers. We can do a lot of things, but I would much rather work that case with somebody that knows that part about it. And I tell people this all the time. I'm not a funeral director. I'm not a death investigator. Yeah, I am a death
Wait a
investigator.
second.
Wait a minute. Back
My
that
whole
up.
life's a lie.
So it's like I'm not a funeral director, and I'm not in law enforcement. I am there, but I have a job, and my job is, and my expertise is determine the death and determine the cause and the manner of that death. That's what I'm specialized in. And so I break that down for everybody when I tell them that, just so that doesn't get confused a lot of times. And because everybody has a job, we want to make sure that we stay that collaboration and everybody works that scene together.
And it's also always two sets of eyes are better than one. We may walk into something and you see it and I'm like, oh, okay, what if we try this? And then you're like, yeah, and then let's try this. It just helps. It helps brainstorm ideas. It brings new ideas into something that, we may have exhausted everything we're thinking about right there, but somebody else might come in and say, well, have you done this yet? Everything is helpful.
And I think we do have to do that. We have to work together, and we have to make sure that all that happens. I think, and we have a close-knit office. So, and we have several investigators, but everybody has kind of their own expertise. We have somebody that can do forensic odontology, so they can do bite marks. They can look at different angles of the bite marks and tell us, okay, that was this was that. They can also look at teeth to where they can compare different dental records and things like that. We're unique when it comes to that, which is pretty neat. We're also unique that if we pick up the phone and call another investigator and say, hey, I need another set of eyes, they come out and they take a look too, to make sure we don't miss anything.
Yeah.
And that goes on a lot. So we see that a lot of times.
So we kind of broke down, everything that could go on a death certificate, how you cipher through different scenes and stuff. But what is the biggest takeaway you want listeners to take away from this episode?
Probably the biggest thing that I could probably say is number one, you only get one chance to do things right.
Yeah.
So do it right. The biggest thing there is make sure that you follow all your testing, you follow your evidence, and then you're going to get it correctly on a death certificate. Those are the big things that matter for years to come. And so when we do that, we want to make sure as investigators that we are doing everything possible to give the family the closure that they need and the facts that they need to get it right.
And that timing that comes with it too. You know, it could be a couple days when we're like, yep, like this is, you know, we don't have to do anything else. Could be weeks where we're waiting on that toxicology test, or it could be months to years waiting on the right testing from, you know, an autopsy or different tissue samples. So just that the timing that it takes, families like know that you're trying to give them everything that you have for them to get the truth.
And that's what matters. I mean, every day seems like a week, or every day and every week really seems like a month, and every month seems like a year. But we will not let something go out of there that we don't have all the facts about.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's all we have for him today. It's a pretty good episode, very informative. We got into a lot more details than I maybe thought we would have with this.
Well, I think it's important too.
Yeah.
It kind of breaks it down and lets people know, and the general public know, of how hard that is to make sure we get it right. So hopefully you all enjoyed the program. We'll be back next week with episode 11, and hopefully we see you then.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed today's episode or any of the other ones we've published, be sure to like, follow us on all social media, share it all out, and keep staying tuned for the next ones.